Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Fred Macy for Leverage the Podcast. Today, we are releasing part 1 of our conversation with Lauren Gillette, a courageous survivor. The story is amazing. It was so long that we got so deep into it that we divided it into 2 parts. Monday will be second part, and it's an amazing recovery story. I want you all to listen to it. There's something for all of us in it. Thank you, Lauren, for your great story.
You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly.
After her marriage split up when I was 5, we had a really tragic car accident, and she ended up being disabled for quite a while. And her younger sister had married a Canadian. Mm-hmm. And unbeknownst to my mother, her younger sister submitted her educational accomplishments, university psychology degree in Mexico, in the town of Saltillo, to University of Toronto. And they said, fine, we'll accept you as long as you revalidate some classes and so on. So she had to do some remedial stuff. And then she got in to do her master's and PhD. And from there, I think she was always interested in medicine. She was always interested in well-being. I'm not 100% sure why she chose addiction, but she ended up working as a senior scientist at the Addiction Research Foundation of Canada.
Oh my God.
So she focused on alcoholism and on middle-aged women with polypharmacy addictions and alcohol. Wow. So she opened up
Mother's Little Helper.
halfway houses in Toronto to bring people in, to rehab them with whole army of nurses, not MDs.
Oh, right. Like support, auxiliary.
Yeah, social workers and so on.
Right.
And to teach, a variety of different approaches, some similar to AA, some more controlled drinking, depending on the individual.
Sure.
So she said, I think one blanket approach for everyone isn't the best, because some people I can teach how to do controlled drinking, such as some of the politicians in Canada, other executives who were highly functional but having problems with alcohol. So she would teach them to go down. And so it was done as part of the Canadian socialized medical model. And so it was taken then to various Scandinavian countries, such as Norway and Sweden, I believe Finland as well. And she would go and live there for a while to get it going. And then Germany, Spain, and then South America to Brazil, Argentina, and Bolivia. So she would live in all these countries. And it was called Drinkwise. Wow. Yeah. And her husband, she married an Englishman later on, was also traveling with her. So it was a group effort. He's a very well-educated man, born in Kenya.
I love Kenya. That's my favorite country in the world.
And then
Your favorite?
Love it.
Kenya.
If I can move there, I will.
He lived, I think, adjacent to the Maasai as a young man, and then got sent to the premier schools in England, like, Eton.
Right.
And then I believe he went to Oxford, master's, PhD in neuropsychology, and then ended up being recruited by I think, York University in Toronto.
Yeah,
You being Canadian,
Great university.
where he became the chief there, and then he went to one of my mother's lectures, and a few days later he shacked up.
Fell in love. Love at first sight.
And I think he had been married to an actress in England before that, but he's a super guy in many ways, not multi-talented in many aspects.
Okay.
So,
hey, everybody. Welcome to the Leverage Podcast. Once again, I'm Davio, and we have Dr. Suave Federico Macy. And we are very excited to have our guest today, Lauren Gillette. And I think the topic is going to be, very exciting for everybody to delve into.
yes.
Today's topic is addiction.
Not an easy topic by any stretch.
That's
for
why
anyone.
we chose a special guest.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Lauren, as we were sharing a few minutes ago, we're fellow Canadians, and you share your journey of how you ended up in Texas at approximately, age 10, with your dad being an engineer, and because of business, and you and your, 4 siblings moved here with your mom, and ended up in Highland Park, of all places. Not the most diverse place on earth.
It was a whole new world.
And my story was different. I went from Mexico
You went
to an
the opposite.
incredible, diverse place, living with Eastern Europeans, very talented, people who had immigrated to Canada post World War II, and so that was quite a different experience. But nevertheless,
So I'd love to hear about your, obviously it was Highland Park where it started, your journey through addiction.
Okay. I think that I had never labeled the feeling that I felt from such a young age as anxiety, but I think that I now realize that I was probably a sensitive child and that I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, but I didn't have any tools to deal with it.
Right.
No one talked about anything in my family, and I just had a natural gift of coordination. I could run. I was fast.
You were an athlete.
I was an athlete.
Natural born athlete.
So I played soccer and I ran and I did gymnastics and
So that was your initial escape?
Yeah.
Or a coping mechanism?
Yep. I would run the mile. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. So it was,
You guys went to school together, shared some years or some overlap?
Barely, yeah.
Barely, yeah.
yeah.
A few months.
And so it was this mandatory mile and I would get out there and haul ass. I mean, haul ass, because I had all this stuff inside of me that I realized I could just put it out there. I could run and I could get it out and I had this talent. And all of a sudden people were like, oh, wow, she is fast. Like,
Her nitric oxide was
yeah,
doing
like,
the job.
Ooh, can we have her on our soccer team?
Yes.
Does she want to do this? And so that was a nice gateway into some friendships. But then, as I started, I was a teenager, obviously, going through puberty and whatnot. And we would go to Canada in the summer. So my parents are from Winnipeg. And they had this lake house on Lake Winnipeg. And up there in Manitoba, the drinking age is 18. So it was very socially acceptable to drink,
Yes.
even as a young girl, as a teenager. So, and all my parents and my parents' friends, like everyone would drink in the evenings. So 5 o'clock was, the usual. And
It's a very Canadian thing, though, isn't it?
It really is. And I don't know if it's so
very
fucking cold up there. You have to drink to numb
Yes.
out to get through this
it is.
winter.
It's an automatic.
It is.
Yes.
It is. That's literally what it is.
Yes.
So interesting. And they have great whiskey up there, I guess.
Yes. It
Good
was,
beer.
during the Prohibition, it was certainly brought over across the Great Lakes
Sure.
in the middle of the night.
Sure. So
Yeah.
anyway, I started drinking up there in the summertime, and I think it was about 14 or 15. And I came back to Dallas, and I was sort of hung out in this crowd that was mixed. It was some people who were a couple years older as well, and of course I wanted to fit in, right? And I thought, oh well, I drink, you drink, I drink, and so it just I started.
So when you came back, were you already hanging out with kids that drank before you went to Canada, or
No.
did it sort of organically when you came back there were kids that were drinking now?
Yeah, it was like we were crossing the bridge into high school, and some kids in my group, it was a fairly large group, and some kids had already started drinking, and but none of my friends had started drinking, my girlfriends, but I had drank that summer.
Already. And the kids that were they getting it from their parents, unbeknownst to them, or
Yeah.
were they hiring somebody to go buy it for them?
No, I didn't hire people back then.
Hey, kid.
No, it was like you would stand on the corner
Yes.
and give someone a patron going into 7-Eleven or a liquor store,
Right.
give them some money and say, hey, can you get this for
Right.
me?
That's it.
Or when their parents would go out to dinner, we would sneak into the liquor cabinet because nothing was locked up. Like there were
Not in
no
those days.
cameras
Right.
back then. It was just a lot more accessible.
In Canada, where I went to high school in Toronto, we went to grade 13, and the drinking age was 18,
Right.
and the bar stayed open until 2.
Yep.
So in our senior year, we could all drink. So it wasn't as big a deal
No.
anymore, because often, or when occasionally, some of our teachers would come to the bar with us.
Right. It's fun. It's social. It's such an European influence up there.
Yes.
And in Europe, they drink wine at lunch. That's just the
Yes.
normal
It's the
thing.
normal part, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember my first day of school and when I went to university in England, and we all went to lunch and everybody got a beer, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll have one.
I'll have one too.
But then they all got a second beer, and I was like, wait.
Oh, good for you. You have such control.
So in those early years, your group was not actually drinking, but you had already.
I started drinking and I loved the way it made me feel.
Those endorphins were
And
backing you up.
Right? I felt
Uninhibited.
uninhibited.
Confident.
I could
Yes.
dance. I was smart.
Yeah.
I was
You smiled.
beautiful.
Yes.
All the guys liked me. The
Yes.
girls, I didn't really care what the girls thought at that point. I was more into getting attention.
She's like, and I still don't.
well,
I'm kidding. But you felt
it
that it
changed.
elevated you to a level of popularity and
Absolutely.
disinhibition.
That was it. Because all my years previous, I was insecure. I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel secure.
So at home, some of those dynamics weren't giving you the proper or the optimal, I suppose, love and validation, or corresponding to your need for affection.
Wasn't there.
Right.
It wasn't there. We never talked about that kind of stuff.
Right. So over here, all of a sudden, you're getting the attention that
Craved.
that becomes addictive. It's in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think that happens to a lot of kids.
Yeah, I think so.
And a lot of girls start having sex early
Yes.
to gain that popularity and acceptance as well, even though they may feel really shame or poor about themselves later on,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. And then you combine the two and you're off to the races.
Yes.
And all of a sudden,
Yeah. That coming together is catastrophic. So you're seeking it more.
you're seeking it. But then the next morning, I was a blackout drinker pretty early on. So I didn't.
At what age did you start drinking to blackout?
Well, I never.
14?
I never drank just one drink.
Yes.
I never remember drinking socially.
So I want to say a little comment about neurochemistry.
Well, I was going to ask you that, yeah.
Yeah. Why some black out and some don't.
Yeah.
Okay. So drinking, and I'll go through it really quick. First, your prefrontal cortex at the front says, oh, this is good. I'm enjoying this. From there, the signal goes to the nucleus accumbens because of the release of endorphins. And that gives you your dopamine high. You say, oh, this is good. You have another drink. And from there, you disable your security system in the amygdala. And so where you say, the amygdala is saying, hey, you've had enough. Oh, no. Go in the corner. You're time out for you. And then you keep drinking. And after a couple more drinks, there's a part called below the hypothalamus, the subthalamic nuclei, and that's where you form acute memories, recent memory. So you drown it out. That's the next one that gets turned off. So there are people, and I've had a couple of patients that go on a binge. So this is more common in young people, but it can occur in older individuals who binge. And so they're drowning out this new memory formation in the subthalamic nuclei. And so they can go up to 2 weeks without remembering. There are businessmen that go somewhere, they binge, and 2 weeks later they find them and like, what am I doing in this hotel room? They don't remember how they got there. And it may last 2-3 weeks. But the more common one is passing out and not having the memory of the event the night before.
I would drink till I passed out, but my tolerance became really high
Right. So you needed more.
very quickly. And so remember Zima?
Yes.
Oh, so that was a malt liquor.
Yes.
Right.
So I love that because it was triple the percentage of alcohol. So
right.
I could get there quick.
Yes.
And so I would literally just chug. And so then I was on top of the world and I would drink so much so quickly, acutely,
Right.
that my body, it wouldn't just pass out. I would drive home
Right.
after these parties
Incredible.
and have no memory the next morning.
Yes. So again, that whole circuit
Right.
was causing such damage to yourself, unbeknownst to you. And then it would repeat again, perhaps a few days later or a few weeks
Yes.
later, where each time you require more alcohol to reach the same level
Right.
of endorphin, dopamine, and clearly the loss of memory.
Right. And so
There's a rape culture in colleges, sorry to interrupt,
No, that's
because of this issue.
I
And
believe
it's
it.
horrific.
I believe it.
Yes.
So then you start drinking, all's fine and dandy. You're more popular. You're having a great time. When did the wheels start to?
When the alcohol ran out, I was out. If there was no alcohol at a party, I wasn't going to go. I would only, because that was my purpose, was to get drunk. I needed that.
How many days a week were you drinking?
Well, for sure, Friday, Saturday, probably Sunday.
And this is high school.
Yes.
So grade 10, grade 11,
Great.
12,
Yeah.
all those years.
And usually I would not drink during the week, but you know what I was doing was restricting my food during the week. And so
Right.
I became an exerciseaholic. I would run before school and I would run during track practice, and then I would go to the gym and I wouldn't eat. And so that was another form of addiction.
Yes.
So I was surviving throughout the week with my food addiction, and then on the weekends,
What were you eating?
So more anorexia. you're saying.
yes, absolutely. I was
Were you concerned
anorexic.
about your body image or about gaining weight?
I was concerned about my body image, and I also thought the less weight I had, the faster I would become. So I started, remember those mini thins? Mm-hmm. I started
Yeah.
taking those at gas stations because it's a speed, it's an amphetamine.
Right.
So I would take those, I would run track or cross country and, not starve myself essentially. I would eat 0 carbs. I don't even know what I ate.
Minimal. A little fruit here and there, banana or apple.
No.
Not even?
I kept my sugar level under 5 grams, like carbohydrate,
Oh, wow.
less than 5 grams a
Like
day.
So excessive ketosis.
Yes, I would eat iceberg lettuce
Right.
with balsamic vinegar.
And that's it.
That was it. And I was just starving.
Did your parents not see this? Or
They saw it. They never
mention it?
said anything.
what about your peers, other girls? Let's say you went and said, hey, let's go get a salad somewhere.
But you were drinking on the
go?
weekends.
Yeah.
So she was getting enough calories.
She's getting a lot of calories in a binge format,
Right.
but not optimal calories or optimal nutrition. She's
Especially
malnourished.
since I was working out more than 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
I was sick.
Right. She was in catabolism. She's breaking down muscle. She's not.
Was your performance
Building it.
suffering in running?
A little bit. I'm sure I could have done better.
The resiliency of the human body. Yeah? It's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
How much abuse you can withstand through those young years.
Right.
You know, the Superman gene kicks up as well.
And then I would supplement with marijuana.
Right.
We would.
So you're on speed, alcohol, and marijuana at this point.
It's the story of my life.
But the marijuana brings it down as well. You
But
know,
I was
the
really
alcohol.
smart when I went to English class.
Right. Well, that was just a gift from the gods to give you wonderful
I was very creative.
abilities.
It was easier for you to write.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so brilliant.
So, did you have a group of friends that were joining you in these
Yeah.
behaviors?
So I only hung out with people, water seeks its own level.
Right.
So I only hung out with people that were doing the same behavior as I was because I didn't want to look at my own self.
Right.
So anyone that was disproving of how I was living my life, I'm not your friend anymore.
Right.
You go, don't tell me how to live. I'm surviving.
Right. Did you have a boyfriend during those times?
Oh yeah,
Or
always.
several?
I always had.
And
a
were
boyfriend.
they encouraging you on
Yeah.
the drinking?
Well, she would only be with a boyfriend if he was a drinker and
Right.
partier as well.
Right. And the boyfriend at the time, he was doing steroids as well. And
He was building.
I had a really great
anabolic
picker.
steroids.
Really
Yes.
great picker.
I see. So he was trying to build muscle for football, presumably.
Wrestling.
Or
He was a
wrestling.
wrestler.
Oh, okay. That's
So
fine.
he was probably anorexic as well
Yeah.
at the same time, like, right?
Yeah.
Right.
You guys
So
shared
4%
anorexia.
body fat and
And
lean
he
muscle.
was aggressive. We were abusive to his
But the
total
withdrawal will do
dysfunction.
that,
Yeah, it was
right? You were probably going into mini withdrawals. I mean, after you've been drinking for some time, say presumably 6 months or
Well,
more.
Monday to the Friday.
Right, and then
you
she-
were probably like just
difficult to
having-
be around.
Yeah.
Really lovely. This is why my parents sent me away.
Yes. So
Can you imagine?
They finally said, okay, let's get you out of this toxic environment.
Yes.
And send you to another one.
Yes.
Equally toxic.
They had no idea, though.
No.
They just thought
They meant well.
geographic cure.
Yes.
So that year was great.
Which year?
The year in Switzerland.
No, it was not great because you know what? I was lonely. So here I am. I grew up in Texas. I learned Spanish. So my mom gave us a choice in Toronto. We could either do a French immersion, which my younger sister chose to do, which was half English, half French throughout the day, or we could go to public school. And so I chose public school. I don't think we learned any French at the time. So when I moved down here, I chose to speak Spanish.
Right.
You know, I chose that as my language of choice. But when I went to Switzerland, we lived in Neuchâtel, which is in French part of.
Right.
Yes.
So I didn't speak French. We lived with the pension family, and I had 2 roommates, and one spoke 5 languages fluently.
Wow.
So English, French, Spanish,
German.
Ukrainian, and Polish.
Wow.
Her parents were Ukrainian Polish. And
Impressive.
it was very, I mean, I love her. She's amazing. She's so smart. And then my other roommate spoke English and French, bilingual. Everyone in Canada is bilingual.
Right.
But this family had been boarding students for 30 years, but they wouldn't speak French to me. And I was
Why wouldn't they speak French?
I'm sorry, they wouldn't speak English to me.
okay.
Well, they were trying to
That's the
force
point.
you to learn.
Oh, it was such a brat. And I just was like, fuck you. I'm
rebellious.
a rebel.
You were rebellious.
I'm just a rebel by nature. And I was like, fuck you.
Yes.
And so I didn't make an effort. I picked it up because I had to, wherever I went to the
Socialize,
restaurants and
yeah.
socialize. But
Did you have a boyfriend there?
No, I
soon
was
enough?
with the same guy. I would talk on the phone for hours and hours. But so we would go to these clubs, right? All the time, everywhere. I quickly found out maybe in September that my grades weren't going to transfer. So I didn't really go to school, but I did go to the bars and I did go to the clubs, and we traveled all around Europe and different place every weekend. It was a phenomenal experience, but I became very depressed because I was so lonely. So what did I do? I drank more. And I did more drugs and more ecstasy.
And where would you get all of that?
Well, we could get it at the clubs.
At the clubs.
It was very accessible.
Very easy there. And anyone at school or friends you were there for your last year of high school?
No, it was just a gap year.
A gap year, okay. And so no friends that would join you, a co-pilot?
Yes, but I think it's the age where everyone's kind of letting loose. Right? When you're 18, 19, you're drinking.
That's when I found my limits.
Going out?
Yeah.
You're
having
going
sex?
out. Yeah, but you're not necessarily an alcoholic,
No.
right? You're just
you would
having
never
fun.
Think of it that way.
Never. And there was no one in my family. I'd never heard of the label associated with anyone I knew. So I just thought my behavior was kind of normal. A lot of people, same
age.
thing. People partied like I did. Otherwise, but my roommate at the time, it's interesting. So I just went to Cartagena, Colombia with her a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And we got to talk about a lot of stuff about that year. And it turns out she didn't drink as much as I did. And she was responsible, and she would come home, and she was sort of like my mother. She was worried about me when I never showed up at night because I'd be some random place with some random person that probably didn't speak English. I mean, I'm just so lucky to be alive today. And it just got worse. That was sort of the crest.
You were ramping up in
I was
essence.
ramping up.
Right. And so what happened? You returned to the U.S.?
I returned
Go
to the
school,
U.S.
university?
and I, much to my parents' dismay, followed this same guy from high school
Right.
to university. So I went to the University of Oklahoma,
Right.
and it was
Where they drink.
Yes.
it was terrible. It was terrible. But you know what? My solution was to get a job at the liquor store. So I thought, okay, these are my people. An alcoholic getting a job at the liquor store.
Wow.
Free booze.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like Mrs. Popular. people were texting me, hey, we want a 6-pack of this and a case of this and a handle of vodka. And I was like, I was the cool girl. This is all I wanted to be my whole life, right? So,
But you were studying. You were presumably doing
Presumably.
reasonably well in school.
no, I
No?
was not doing well.
What were you studying?
International business.
Okay, so that's challenging.
Well, for the first year, but then I stopped going to class because it was interfering with
With
my
your drinking
drinking.
time, right?
I mean, that's not fun going to class.
Did you get into legal problems at any time during?
I did.
that year? What
I
happened?
started getting public intoxications because my roommate would drink as much as I did.
So you get a misdemeanor of some sort?
We would go to jail, and but then I did get a
How many times did that happen?
during college,
Yeah.
maybe 3 public intox, but yeah, misdemeanor.
Right.
And then I failed out of school, but I was so ashamed to tell my parents that I would lie to them. You know, everything wasn't electronic back then. So I would say, oh, I need this money for tuition and my books and this and that. And they would send it to me directly. Well, what did I do with it? I went to the bar and I went to the liquor store and I would buy people. I had a gas card. So if you give me $20, I'll buy your gas. It was really my parents' gas card, right? And so my drinking just went through the roof.
Did you ever end up in a hospital, injured, or anything
Well,
like that?
that's interesting you ask.
He is Dr. Suave.
Jeez. Okay, so that boyfriend and I broke up, and I started dating a new guy.
Was the alcohol responsible for the breakup, or nothing to do with it?
Oh, absolutely. We both had a problem, and we were both emotionally abusive.
And it was probably like
Right.
the 5th time you'd broken up.
it was
right?
so dysfunctional and so toxic, just toxic. And so I started dating a new guy, and we had this experience one night, and I remember little bits and pieces of it, but it was awful for me. And the next day, I took a whole bottle of Advil because part of me wanted attention, but part of me wanted to die. Part of me was so depressed. I had come down from the alcohol and the drugs the night before, and I didn't have a purpose. You know, I had failed out of school already. I was dating these not losers, but probably losers.
Guys who weren't up to the standard you would have preferred.
Or my parents would have preferred, because I was still very much impressing, trying to impress them and live up to their expectations.
Yeah.
And so I took a whole bottle of Advil. And my boyfriend at the time called 911, and I had to go and get my stomach pumped.
The charcoal and
Yeah.
all that.
And you would think that would be a bottom.
Yeah.
My parents came to get me. He called them, and they came. My mom came and scooped me up and brought me to Charlotte and had me do an alcohol assessment. One of the legit ones from Johns Hopkins University,
Right.
where if you get one answer wrong, one red flag, you are considered an alcoholic. And I minimized every single answer on there. And he still told me I was an alcoholic. And I said, well, that's not true. Because if I'm an alcoholic, that means everyone I know is an alcoholic,
Right.
which was true. But I just was in complete denial.
All right.
And my parents had a huge wine cellar, and I was sneaking bottles of wine and drinking in the closet by myself at 18, 19.
Why in the closet? So no one else would know?
Yeah, because I was ashamed. And so I could, in front of my family, I would have 1 or 2 drinks, maybe 2 or 3 drinks, because I didn't want them to know I had a problem. But before I would actually interact, or after I would interact, I would go back in my closet, because we had these walk-in closets, and I would drink wine.
But that is common when, people who are alcoholics, they drink by themselves, they hide it. They have bottles hidden throughout the house. That's the classic.
And I was young. You hear these stories.
Yes. You hear it and you see that in older individuals, not so
Yes.
much in 18, 19-year olds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a more of extreme case.
So alcoholism, the disease, is a progressive
Yes,
disease. And so
absolutely.
it already had progressed enough to where I was a daily drinker by the time I was 20 years old.
Right.
20 years old. And so the way that I thought the solution for me to hide it was to never live in the same state as my family members. So my parents were in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, I convinced my dad that I needed to move to Kansas City.
Right.
And I would move to Kansas City, and I had these dreams, and I meant it. I was going to re-enroll in school. I was going to find a job. I lived in this high-rise building right across the street from the plaza downtown, and so I could walk to the bar. That was sort of the way I could prolong my drinking. Right. I would walk to the bar, but then I would drive my car in a blackout down to OU to visit my friends, or if there was a football game. Football was so popular.
Right.
Yeah, it's a culture.
So it's a culture. So I got my first DUI in Kansas City, and I was driving in a blackout. I'd gone to the bar, come home, gotten in the car. I don't know why or where I was going, but I got pulled over and I blew a .252.
Wow.
Right. And
impressive.
I'm the size of...
So inebriation usually more than .10. Some places
It's .08. It's .08.
Yeah, I'm in some cases. But Oklahoma probably 2.0. No, I'm kidding. But that tells you that the degree of tolerance that she's built up.
At 20 years old?
At 20 years old, it's an impressive statistic, that number.
And I'm not a big person.
No, your volume of distribution is low.
Right.
And your alcoholic dehydrogenase at the enzyme that breaks down was going clockwork, right?
Yeah. And at that point, I had started getting sick. Mm-hmm. My body was breaking down. And
keep going. I need to get Miles to open it. Can you guys open the door for Miles, please?
So
it's going to be an all-Canadian podcast.
So I called my sister and brother-in-law to come and bail me out of jail.
Wow.
Not your parents.
So you were there overnight, basically?
Well, they throw you in the drunk tank and they make you sober up. I think it's 4 hour minimum. And we were catching a flight the next morning to Canada.
Right.
And so I was in there. I don't really remember. I mean, I was still in a blackout. And it was good back then about compartmentalizing my feelings. Because, of course, I felt so much shame.
Right.
But I didn't want to feel that,
But, I mean, your family found out what happened, right?
They did.
Yeah. And any admonishments or talk from dad or mom to say, hey, what's going on?
Talk, but I didn't listen.
So you minimized it and swept it away.
Still.
Okay.
And then I remember driving down to Oklahoma the following fall. So I had a suspended license at that point. I had a felony. A DUI is a felony, right? Or DWI. So I was driving down to Oklahoma and I got pulled over. And so then I got a driving with a suspended license under my belt. I tried to hide that. And I think by then it was just getting worse and worse and worse.
Did you have to go in front of a judge?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
Because I think today
probably. So
you have to, and then they say you have to do alcohol rehab. You have to show sobriety and urine tests and spontaneous, right?
So this was 2000, maybe 1999, 2000. And I think by now my sisters were concerned and called my mom. And I remember my mom left a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous on my bed one night. And I remember this so clear, so vividly. I was watching the final episode of Sex and the City. Right. And I saw this book, and they were drinking Cosmos.
Yeah, the Cosmos.
And so I would drink Cosmos because I thought it was really classy.
Yeah, chins on.
And so I remember just weeping and trying to read this book, and I couldn't read obviously because I was probably drunk.
Was that the 1939 original?
Copy.
Huh?
The first edition.
Yeah, that was 1939.
I know.
12 steps and all that, and the rationale behind it.
Yeah. And so, but I didn't absorb any of the language and any of the verbiage. My mom had started going to Al-Anon at that point, and maybe my sisters too, because I think that everyone could see that I had a big problem.
Al-Anon is for family members of alcoholics.
Right.
And so then they came. I remember we were on a ski trip probably for Christmas to Banff or Lake Louise. That's where we would go.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. And my parents approached me and they said, do you want to come home with us to Charlotte after this? And I said, okay. I knew at that point I was on my way to surrendering because I couldn't hold a job. I didn't have any money in my bank account. I couldn't go back to school. My life was completely unmanageable by age 20. So I said, okay. And so I went back to Charlotte with them, and they had a neighbor who was a cardiologist, and they said, will you go talk to Dr. Thompson next door? He was a cardiologist. Look at that. So I went over there, and I knew him. I trusted him, and I felt like he cared about me. Right. And he sat me down and he said, do you think you have a problem with drinking? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said,
that was the first time you acknowledged it?
It was the first time ever. Yeah. I think I was,
that's a huge
I don't even know if I was 21. I was young.
Right.
It was a huge step. And he said, would you consider going to a rehab? And I said, okay, but I will only go to a rehab in Florida, California, or Hawaii. I've heard about this Hazelton place in Minnesota, and it's January, and I am not fucking going there. Let me tell you. I was such a brat.
Did you get your wish?
I did.
And you went to Florida?
I always get what I want. I always get
that's
what
not
I want.
necessarily good, but let's go. So you went to Florida.
Okay, so I went to Florida, Delray Beach, and I went to this place called Renaissance, and it was the last stop on the bus for everyone.
Right.
I didn't go to Betty Ford. Everyone that was at Renaissance had already been to other rehabs, maybe 5, maybe 10, fancy.
Right.
And this was my first one. And so I remember getting there and I called my mom and I said, Mom, this is not for me. I just drink a little bit of wine.
Right.
And, they say that everyone, when you get there, reality hits and it's scary. And we didn't have cell phones back then. And so I wasn't able to contact anyone in my family for 30 days, for the first 30 days, because they really want to
focus on you,
immerse you in this new world. And so,
how many people were there in that
maybe
circle?
50.
50. So it's a big group.
It was a big group, and we lived
all ages.
All ages.
Were you the youngest?
No, I wasn't the youngest. There was even people there for gambling, Gamblers Anonymous.
Right.
But most were from the East Coast. Very affluent families, heroin, cocaine,
opioids,
crack,
and alcohol mainly.
Not many just alcoholics like me.
So a polypharmacy and alcohol too.
This was when OxyContin was first coming out.
Right.
This is probably 2001.
Right.
And so there were a couple adults there because I'm 22. I'm 21, 22. And so I remember there were a couple adults there who had had a knee surgery, who had had a back surgery, who had been prescribed these
Oxy.
And
a small number became addicted.
They couldn't stop.
Yes.
They became addicted. And so their families sent them there.
After a similar path as what you had gone through, I'm sure.
Right, but probably more destruction. Because they were
truancy, delinquency,
things
of that, accidents, violence,
marital problems.
No doubt,
absentee parents. I mean, you name it.
All of it.
It's bad.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was in there and I was in such denial still, and plus I was young. I was immature, but they wanted to break me down. Because I thought, well, as long as I look good, I'm fine.
Yes.
Fine. I would dress really cute to go to the meetings, do my hair. I would lay out, get a tan.
Right.
I would work out, exercise. I looked great.
Healthy.
And you weren't drinking, so your body
wasn't drinking.
Yeah, your body was
detoxing.
replenishing.
Yeah.
So they said, nope, only sweats to the meetings.
Right.
No more tanning. You're on a tan ban. What? No more working out. They were trying to break me down, to feel my feelings, because I was so numb to all my feelings. They would say, you are the angriest person in this group. And I thought, what, little old me? You're like,
Right.
You're crazy, not me. And so I did 6 months inpatient rehab.
Wow.
6 months, guys.
And most people were there 30 days, right?
Was
So-
that their choice? Like, how did you stay
They
so
said
long?
I was sick. I was sick, and I was sick. And so then I got out, and so they would bust us.
So at the end of the 6 months, did you feel, A, that it had helped you, that this was the right thing that needed to be done? Or were you still sort of rejecting, a little rebellious?
Well, I think you were saying
About
you said
it.
they bust you.
So they bust us to meetings. We started going to AA meetings.
Right.
And let me tell you guys, the very first time I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I felt a sense of belonging. I thought, these are my people.
Right.
They understand me. It was this woman speaking, and she was 60 years older than me. And yet she told my story. And I thought, how the heck?
And back on Leverage, after our minor technical difficulties, we are here with Lauren and Davio. And so we shall continue with the initiation into AA. Back when you were a young woman.
So you had this meeting, and all of a sudden you felt a connection.
I just felt like I found my people finally. Even though I grew up in a family of 5 children and 2 parents who are still married, I never felt like I belonged in my own family. I never felt like I was like a floater my whole life until I went to this 12-step meeting, and I thought, oh, wow, like I could breathe. And these people understood me, and they could, when I would tell these stories, everyone would nod their head. Like, oh yeah, I get that. I've done that. It was like all the shame and all the fears and anxiety about not belonging just fell away.
Was it hard for you to talk?
I didn't think I was as spiritual or as smart as these other people. They just seemed so wise. And I wasn't there yet.
So many were older, of course, professional individuals, parents themselves.
All of the above.
So they perhaps were, from a maturity standpoint, obviously, had the wherewithal to be able to speak about their problems and come clean with it and accept that they had a problem.
And just so open and honest. And I just thought, wow. I met this one young woman. She was probably in her 30s, and she had some time, which to me was like a year, 2 years, 5 years. I couldn't imagine not drinking for that long.
Right.
How was I going to get married without drinking? How was I going to I was just future tripping, just thinking, how was I going to, how do you get through life without drinking? I didn't know anyone that didn't drink.
Right.
And so I would listen to these stories, and I realized that there was hope for me. I didn't have to drink like I did before. And I accepted the fact, I learned enough in my program that I accepted the fact that I was an alcoholic, because I looked through my lineage and I thought, ooh, I see this in my grandmother. I see this, down the line.
So these are the meetings that they're busing you to. Mm-hmm. And this is where you first start to accept.
That I had a problem. But I didn't think I was a drug addict.
Right. So that was during the 6 months. And so you're going to the meetings on a weekly basis or
No, more often than that. Daily.
daily?
I would get up early and I would go to my meeting, and then I would go to work. I started working in a chiropractor's office.
Very nice.
And I loved my life. I lived close to the beach. So I would go to the beach after work. And then I met...
Were you being monitored to make sure that you didn't escape?
No. I was free.
And you had no, cravings to seek
not
alcohol?
to drink. Nope. So then I met this guy, and he was beautiful.
Right.
His name was George, and he was from Pittsburgh.
Right.
And he had
the beautiful guy from Pittsburgh. The one.
The one good-looking guy that ever came from
I've never
Pittsburgh.
been to Pennsylvania, but this guy was hot. So
I'm sure there are many hot guys in Pennsylvania.
I'm sure there are.
Now we're going to get a lot. Direct all the hate mail from Pittsburgh to Fred. I did not make that
No,
comment.
I love Pittsburgh.
So I love the Steelers. So I love
Yes.
NFL. I love the Steelers.
Who didn't love the Steelers?
Right?
Man. That's impressive.
And anyway, so I had 6
Wait, you're
months.
not a Cowboys fan?
No, of course I was a Cowboys fan, but I was a chameleon. So if you like the Steelers, I like the Steelers.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
She was a
There we go.
pleaser.
I was a pleaser.
Yes.
I knew how-
Recovering people pleaser.
Right.
Yes.
So I was just a manipulator at the time. I still craved attention, and I still craved being needed and wanted and seen. So anyway, I had 6 months, and this guy had 3, and I have this caretaking gene inside of me, and so I thought, well, I will help you. I'll help you. I'll fix you. We'll go to meetings. It'll be great. We'll live this sober life. 9/11 happened. I was living in a halfway house at the time. I was sober. And then shortly after, I moved into an apartment with a roommate. And this guy showed up at my apartment, and he was nodding off. Have you heard that term before?
Yes.
Right.
That's
So-
a heroin.
It's opiate.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen that before.
Right.
I'd never seen that. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, oh, nothing. I'm fine. And I was like, no. Like, just come clean. What
He's
is
an
wrong?
addict, yeah.
He was an addict, and his drug of choice is heroin. And so he confessed. And I said, I was so upset at first, because I was so codependent. And I just said, well, and it's that saying, if you can't beat him, join him. I wanted that connection so bad. And I thought, well, if I can get high too, then he'll want me. He'll love me. And so I said, I want to try it. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, that just takes a little bit of convincing. And he said, well, I'll only let you snort it. So I said, okay. And I snorted heroin for the first time, and it was not that great. And I said, well, this isn't good enough. I want to shoot it like you. And so I would never shoot it by myself intravenously, but he would do the deal. And I started shooting it. But you know what? I was still going to my meetings because I had a desire to stop drinking. So I wasn't drinking, and that's the deal. That's the tradition. All you need is a desire to stop drinking, and you are welcome.
Right.
So I still had that desire, even though I was
You were shifting your addiction to a different stimulant, a much more acutely dangerous one.
and it was like this wave would come over me, and it was bliss.
Right.
It was bliss. But then then all the side symptoms start. You get sick to your stomach, and you throw up, and it's disgusting.
Right.
But then you want more because you don't want to feel bad anymore. Right. And as long as I could get more, I would feel okay. And I would go to work, and I thought I could function on it. And one of the doctors there started giving me cocaine. So I would.
How was that conversation?
The chiropractic office, they had cocaine.
One of the doctors
had a habit. Was he trying to have sexual relations with
Probably.
you, and that's why?
Probably.
He was trying to induce that and move that along? So you did some coke with him at the office or outside of the office?
It started outside of the office, but we never had relations, thank God. But I told him that I was an addict, but I was sober. I thought I was sober because I didn't drink.
Right. Well, you were sober from the alcohol.
You were hiding the heroin
Right.
usage from him.
Right.
And justifying it with, well, I'm no longer drinking. I'm good.
Right. So then he started giving me the cocaine. And so I was doing cocaine and then the heroin, up and down and up and down. Wow. And
how long did that go on for?
Not that long, a couple months. Right. And then my roommate started finding needles around the apartment, and she called my parents. And they came down, and they said, we're doing meet us at the treatment center.
Right.
And if you don't, then you're on the street. And so before I went, I drank, and I shot heroin, and I did cocaine, and my parents said that I look like death.
Right.
They said, you look like death. I can't even imagine.
You're probably extremely thin too.
Oh.
Hadn't been eating.
No, I never ate.
Right.
I never ate.
So what happened then?
So they said, you need to come back into treatment or you're on the streets.
Right.
We're not giving you any more money. We're not paying for rent. We're not. And I couldn't afford it on my own, on my salary. Because I was about to lose my job, if I'm honest with myself.
Right.
You can't function. You can't be a functioning heroin addict.
No such thing.
So so I knew I wasn't cut out for the street. I knew it.
Right.
I didn't want to do that. And by the grace of God. So I went back in treatment and I started the withdrawal. I didn't do a medical detox.
Just abstinence day one? Wow.
And it was awful.
You crashed.
And I left. I walked out. I actually walked out and I said, you know what? I just need to get home. I need to go to work on Monday because the addiction starts kicking in and telling you that it's fine. It's manageable. You just need to go to work. You'll be fine. And I started walking down A1A Avenue in Delray Beach and I called the manager of my halfway house. Please come pick me up. Right. I need help, but I just need to go to work on Monday. And so he came and picked me up, and within half a mile, he had convinced me to go back into treatment.
Well, that's lucky.
Yes.
He was an angel.
Right.
His name was Stuart, and if he had not done that, I would be dead. I knew
He saved you.
He saved
at
my
that
life.
moment, at a critical moment. So you went back into
I
the
went
rehab.
back in, and no one even knew I left.
Right.
Because otherwise, you would have had some major consequence. If you just
Right.
leave, you can't leave treatment like that. No one knew. And so it was just this.
You were like, I'm back. And everyone's like, what?
Yeah, she left.
What? You didn't notice I was gone?
Yeah.
Don't you know who I am?
They all have their own, issues that we're dealing with. And
self-centeredness.
yes, what selfishness. God. So you're back. You start doing well then.
So I
And
start
this
doing
time
well.
after the withdrawal, you get better.
I get better. And so I moved up to Charlotte, North Carolina. I moved in with my parents.
That's right.
And I was going to an outpatient treatment program up there. And in walks this guy, and he's beautiful. And his name is Matt.
But not from Pittsburgh.
No,
You
this
already
is
did
the
that
next
one.
Check that box.
Have you noticed how every one of her stories starts with that premise? It's
Yes.
like, in walks the guy who
Yes.
was beautiful from
That
XYZ.
took my breath away. And he was,
He was gorgeous.
he was, infatuation at first sight.
And we had the same sobriety date because he was coming from Arizona and I was coming from Florida. And so we thought it was fate. It was meant to be.
Soulmates.
Soulmates.
So you get together with him.
So we get together and we start going to meetings together. And we were like Mr. and Mrs.
It was your codependent dream.
Yep. We were sober. We were hot. You know,
We were helping each other.
we were.
Yeah.
We were a great example. And he was supposed to pick me up from work one day and he didn't show up. And my heart just sank because I knew. I just knew. And his drug of choice was crack cocaine.
Right.
And it was awful. It was just awful. And I would watch him, but I was still really strong into my meetings. I didn't want to relapse,
Right.
And
So you weren't tempted to try the crack? Good.
it was a little too not enough for me.
Right.
Thank
So
God.
he had a
relapse.
And ended up being
But then
in
he
rehab
came
somewhere
back.
else?
No, he came back in to the meetings. He just came back, and I thought, okay, we can do this. Like, I got you. I'll prop you up.
Right.
You just need to go to get a sponsor. We're all good. And then it happened again and again and again. And I thought, you know what? If we get married, he will not need that drug because I'll be enough for him. It's that codependency.
Yes.
And so we got married in Acapulco. It was gorgeous.
How old
Yeah.
were you at the time?
24.
24. And so you're in beautiful surrounding, having fun. And did the alcohol creep back in over there after the wedding or during?
No. No, it was a sober wedding. Or we were sober. I don't know. If,
Right.
maybe my family drank. It was small, very small.
Were they happy for you, your parents?
They were.
Were they aware of his problems?
They were.
And
But we
accepted?
were very honest, and they accepted me, and they accepted him, and I probably convinced them that everything was going to be fine, and I hadn't told them about the relapse. And
So now we'll have to continue in part 2 next time you come back, right?
Is it? Is it time to
Yeah.
wrap it up? I think.
Her heart stopped.
Well, I want to hear. So, just how long were you guys married?
we were married. Well, so then,
Fred can never wrap it. She literally has a hard stop.
no, it's okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so then he relapsed again, and I thought, you know what? If we have a baby, he's going to be an amazing dad. I know that.
So he has certain core values, morality, things that were beautiful.
beautiful.
And totally into you and totally
we were-
loving and respectful, not toxic.
No, I loved him so much. And I just thought, no one turned their back on me. How can I turn my back on someone else?
And so?
So we got pregnant with our daughter.
Right.
And my whole pregnancy, I had to live with another family because it was so dangerous. And
in North Carolina?
In Charlotte. Yeah.
Okay.
What was so dangerous?
Well, he was using crack.
He kept relapsing.
He was an addict.
Oh, okay.
Relapsing. So
yeah. And I was pregnant and I needed to stay sober and I needed to work.
She was pregnant, right? You didn't want to have opioids during pregnancy. It's catastrophic.
Right. So you moved to...
No, so I just moved in with it was his brother's friend's family. There was a couple and they had 2 young boys. And that was a safe place for me because it was his addiction was making my life unmanageable. Even though I was still sober, it was coming home in the middle of the night. It was hiding all my money, my checkbooks, my credit card.
Right.
I was hiding everything. I was lying for him. Because I was so ashamed of everything that I didn't want anyone to know that side of my life. I wanted it to look good.
How soon in the pregnancy did you realize you had to move out?
I think I hung out there in our home. We lived in a 3-story townhouse for maybe 3 months, as long as I could. And then I just didn't feel safe anymore.
Yeah. So you have the baby, everything was good?
No.
I'm trying to find like a...
No, not yet.
Everything was good. And
not yet.
The Disney princesses all came out and everything was perfect.
It was bad.
But addiction is not like that.
It's not like that. And the thing is, you think, this is so awful. I remember I would feel so much peace when he would get arrested because I knew in jail he was safer than being on the street. He wouldn't die in jail. Right. It was awful.
Right.
And
it's amazing how quickly crack can destroy somebody's life. Mm-hmm. I had a neighbor in New York City who was very successful. He was doing graphics for Fox News. I mean, he was just king of the world. And he started doing crack, and within 2 months he was homeless and broken.
It will take your life fast.
So what happened to him then?
So anyway, we had our daughter, and 5 days later, he went to rehab. And I would drive our little baby
to see him,
to see her dad in the mountains of North Carolina. And I thought, well, when he gets out, we'll be fine. This will be beautiful. So he got out 30 days later, 28-day treatment center. We moved in with his parents. No one told me that you're most fertile when you stop nursing. And so when Taylor was 3 months old, I went back to work. And
you got pregnant again.
Found out I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, I can't do this again.
Right.
And as long as he was sober, I could do it. But then 2 months later, he relapsed. And I called my dad. My parents had moved back to Plano. And I called my dad and I said, Dad, I need to get on a plane today. Because if I don't leave today, I'm not going to leave. Because I knew how codependent I was on him. Right. So I packed a bag for us. My daughter was 5 months old. And we moved to Plano. And still throughout my whole pregnancy, there were weeks that I didn't talk to him. I didn't know if he was dead or alive. Right. He came in for Cole's birth, but it was awful because my parents had Taylor, our daughter, and he wanted to see her. And so they would bring her to visit her dad, but then, they couldn't even say his name. They were so mad at him because they blamed him.
Right, sure.
They didn't understand. I mean, it's a disease.
Exactly.
You're doing the best you can, but it was just so sick. And so I got out of the hospital, and he would come in every month to visit his kids. And or I would bring them out to Arizona. He moved out to Arizona because he had a bunch of friends that were 20 years sober. He had tried to get sober out there as a teenager, and these guys stayed sober. So it was amazing. They were really trying to help him, but still he was...
Why was there no thought of him living in Plano?
I was so scared. Oh, okay. He needed to get better.
On his own first.
On his own. I didn't want, but
the codependency and drawing her in.
Yeah, I get it.
it was, I had
Yeah.
PTSD.
Yes, of course.
It was awful.
You did.
So anyway, he called, I'm walking my kids down the street in their double stroller, and I said a prayer. And I said, God, please give me the strength to be a single mom because they may not have a dad. And a couple of days later, he calls me and he said, I'm in detox. And I said, okay, whatever. I've heard this a million times. He said, no, it's different. And I said, yeah. And he's been sober ever since.
Wow.
We're talking 18 years, 17, 18 years.
So that was maybe the 2 children and you
Yeah.
changed them.
Or it was God. He was,
a spiritual awakening.
Yep.
The thing is about addiction, when people are in addiction, it feels like there's no hope.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons I thought you were going to be such a perfect guest is because you, and this story that you just told, you're hope for people that are in that dark place.
I never give up.
To triumph over it.
I never thought this man would get sober ever in my life. If you had asked me, and I would have said, no, there's no way.
Right.
And the fact that he is sober today, it gives me chills. He is such an amazing dad. Like, it makes me cry. I can't even believe it. And my kids
he lives here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He's so awesome.
And he has a relationship with both the
we
children.
do every other night. Still.
Fantastic.
Still to this day, they're teenagers. They're about to go to college.
Yes.
We have the best relationship. We're friends. We respect each other. He goes to his meetings. I go to mine.
Right.
It's beautiful. And if he can do it, anyone else
Is
can.
he also, so he's helping others as well along the way.
Yep.
With his story and the amazing rebirth of him.
Rebirth. He had nothing when he moved to Dallas. He had no license, no job. And he worked his way up, and now he owns 3 different companies. He's an outstanding citizen, and he is all about service and helping others.
Yeah, sharing all that.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you're doing the same though, right?
I'm trying.
All of these years.
Yeah.
I mean, your story is unbelievable, and just the acknowledgement of, the truth of what happened. Because it can happen to anybody.
It can happen to anyone.
And it happens continually to millions, and they go, voices unheard.
Right.
Right? Where they don't have the help or that hand that says, please come with me.
The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Yeah.
Because addiction is such an isolating disease.
Yes. You have to connect.
Well,
You have
that's
to.
one of your pillars, isn't it?
Yes.
To optimize health.
Yes. Yeah. In our cardiovascular world, the people that are most connected to their community, to friends, are the ones that typically live the longest without heart attacks, strokes, and other, cancers and so on.
Wow.
So it is a pillar in connection. And, and I think on the next podcast, we can talk a little bit about neurochemistry.
Well, that's why I
some
wanted to
various
get to that.
techniques that are being used. The way I approach it in the clinic, sometimes having to use a medication for a short time or longer time, like the St. Clair method with naltrexone that was approved by the FDA for helping individuals who have alcohol addiction. But it also works in other cases. So I want to, at some point, not today, go over a little bit of the chemistry of it.
Well, this
and why
will
it
have
works.
to be a 2-parter for sure.
Yeah, why it works for people who have food addictions, kleptomania, people who have certainly alcohol and other addictions. Gambling as well. How the different areas in the brain that are upregulating that behavior versus the ones that are preventing the inhibitor part of it. So
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about, and I know we have to wrap it up for now, but is also understanding why her reaction.
Yes, we'll go
By
over
a lot,
that.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So, Lauren, we'll have to have you back for the second phase. I know
Thank
we
you.
have a lot of more important territory to cover because we want to share also this with family doctors, with other practitioners, with a gynecologist, internists, and other doctors who don't necessarily ask the questions, punt the topic when they have someone that they suspect may have substance abuse, like the ones you have shared with us. And what are the questions to ask to identify and then perhaps to channel the individuals, some of which may require other health professionals, whether psychologists, psychiatrists, sometimes nurses, sometimes group therapy, including AA and other options, and medications that can help for a short time.
Yep.
Right? A 3 to 6 month, for example, what I mentioned earlier, with the naltrexone can be very effective. And so you block that endorphin high that you get from the alcohol, so you wish not to have any more.
Let's save it for the next podcast.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And,
I'm famous for not wrapping up because I wanted to go on. So
I could go on
that's our running
forever
joke.
too. I
That's
know.
our running joke that I talk too much.
I love it. We could talk
Yes.
for days.
So I just Chandler is reminding me I'm supposed to say this, so to wrap it up.
Oh, your script, yes.
Yeah. So let me. All right, here we go.
But Lauren, thank you for tonight.
Be sure
you
to
for
follow
having
us on
Part two.
Instagram and TikTok. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video and rate on Spotify. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and more to follow.
You.